Hi, I'm Saf. This video is a photo essay about car-centric infrastructure in the United States. I made it because I wanted to understand how everyday spaces, roads, parking lots, garages influence how we move, wait, and behave, often without us noticing. This is not a video arguing that cars are bad or that everyone should stop driving. It's also not a personal story about my life. It's a visual project that looks at how car-centric design works, using photographs and research from urban planning and related fields. The structure is simple. First, I show how streets prioritize movement. Then I look at where all that movement stops, parking and storage. After that, I look at how these environments influence behavior. And finally, I look at how the system becomes cultural, symbolic, and what it leaves behind. Some parts of this video are interpretive, some parts are factual. When I'm stating facts, they are based on planning research and policy history, and I link sources in the description. I took all the photographs on a large format camera and developed photograms using car details I found on crash sites. The goal here isn't to convince you of a solution, it's to make a system that feels normal easier to see. After this, I'll step out of frame and let the images and narration do most of the work. Chapter 1. Circulation. This first section looks at how streets prioritize movement and what that means for who these spaces are designed for. I didn't start this project because I hate cars. I started it because I kept noticing how often I wasn't supposed to be there, walking at night, standing near a road, waiting. These images don't show anything unusual. That's the point. Roads like this are everywhere in the United States. Wide, fast, efficient. They are designed to move things through space as smoothly as possible. When you look at them closely, you start to notice something else. Not who is there, but who isn't. The sidewalk is narrow. The lighting favors the road, the scale assumes speed. Nothing here explicitly says don't walk, but everything quietly suggests that you shouldn't. For much of the 20th century, transportation planning in the US prioritized vehicle movement, things like speed, capacity, and flow, especially through expanding highways and road networks that favored private automobiles over other modes of travel. It shaped local streets, intersections, and neighborhoods. When a space is designed like this long enough, it starts to feel natural. Driving feels normal, walking feels exposed. You don't need a sign to tell you that. Your body already knows. This is what circulation looks like when movement is the priority. The next question is what happens when all that movement needs somewhere to stop. Chapter 2. Containment. If circulation is about movement, containment is about storage. In the United States, a significant portion of urban land is dedicated to parking. This includes garages, surface lots, and underground structures integrated into almost every type of building. Parking didn't become this common by accident. For much of the 20th century, cities across the US adopted zoning rules that required new developments to include a minimum number of parking spaces. These requirements applied to housing, offices, hospitals, schools, and retail. The intention was to accommodate widespread car ownership. The result was that parking became a fixed requirement of urban life. Because parking takes up so much space, it often determines the size and layout of buildings. Structures are pushed farther apart. Entrances are separated from the street. Large portions of land are reserved primarily for storing vehicles. Over time, parking came to be treated as permanent infrastructure. It became permanent architecture. These spaces developed their own internal systems. Movement is controlled by ramps and arrows. Orientation depends on signage rather than visibility or intuition. Pedestrians are present, but they are not prioritized. In many cases, you do not arrive directly at your destination. You arrive at parking first. To get to work, you pass through it. To reach medical care, you pass through it. To return home, you pass through it. Even when parking structures are mostly empty, they remain active. They are lit, ventilated, cleaned, and maintained around the clock. They exist in constant anticipation of cars. Containment is not dramatic or visible in the way highways are. It is administrative, routine, normalized. After decades of repetition, this arrangement stops feeling like a design choice. It feels like the natural order of the city. Chapter 3. Internalization. This section looks at how these environments set the conditions for everyday movement and behavior. In environments designed primarily for cars, people organize daily movement around driving as the default. Distances between destinations increase. Crossings become less frequent. Waiting and walking are pushed to the margins. Urban planning and environmental psychology research has shown that the built environment influences how people move, how often they walk, and which choices feel practical or impractical. When streets prioritize speed and vehicle flow, non-driving behaviors become less convenient and more risky. As a result, people adjust. They choose routes that avoid wide roads. They time their movements to traffic cycles. They cross where they can, not where they should. They stand still in places never designed for stopping. This adaptation is not primarily ideological. It is behavioral. When walking requires detours, exposure, or constant vigilance, people do it less. When driving offers speed, enclosure, and predictability, it becomes the default mode of movement. Over time, these patterns become internalized. People begin to perceive distance in terms of driving time rather than physical space. They experience stillness near roads as discomfort. They feel pressured to keep moving even when they are not in a car. Researchers describe this process as normalization through design, the idea that repeated exposure to a particular spatial logic makes it feel natural and inevitable. The result is that car-oriented systems no longer feel external or imposed. They feel personal. Movement begins to feel like an obligation, waiting feels like an error, standing feels out of place. At that point, the system no longer needs to enforce itself. It has already been learned. Chapter 4. Abstraction and Belief. When a system becomes dominant, it also becomes symbolic. Cars are not only tools for movement, they carry meanings about freedom, independence, success, and control. Those meanings circulate through advertising, popular culture, and everyday language. Abstraction makes this visible. Miniature cars reduce function to form. They strip away weight, speed, fuel, and risk. What remains is the idea of the car. In the United States, car ownership has long been associated with autonomy and personal identity. Driving is framed as choice, mobility is framed as freedom. These associations did not emerge naturally. They were reinforced over decades through marketing, media, and policy that positioned the automobile as a solution to distance, time, and social mobility. When systems are repeated often enough, they become beliefs, not conscious decisions. They are taught early, they are reproduced through play. Toy cars are among the first objects used to simulate movement, control, and direction. They introduce the logic of lanes, collisions, stacking, and accumulation before explanation. As repetition increases, individual differences disappear. Cars become interchangeable. Quantity replaces specificity. At this level, the system no longer needs streets or garages to sustain itself. It exists as pattern. Belief is not always explicit. It operates quietly, through familiarity, aspiration, and routine. The car becomes a symbol of normal life rather than a negotiated choice. Abstraction distances consequences. When movement is reduced to form and form to pattern, the system becomes easier to reproduce and harder to question. At this point, car-centrism is no longer just an infrastructure problem, it is a cultural one. Chapter 5. Residue. Every system produces residue. Not everything moves on. Some things remain. In car-oriented environments, harm is often discussed in aggregate, as rates, averages, or trends. But the physical traces of that harm are specific. Roadside memorials mark places where movement failed. They assign names to locations designed for flow. They interrupt infrastructure with memory. These markers are not part of transportation planning. They appear after the fact, placed by families and communities, not by institutions. They coexist with the system without altering it. When vehicles break, they leave fragments, metal folds, plastic shatters, parts detach from function and become debris. Much of this material is removed quickly, cleared, recycled, discarded. What remains is rarely visible for long. This disappearance is structural. Car systems are designed to maintain continuity. Disruption is treated as an anomaly rather than a condition. Repair is constant. Roads are resurfaced. Vehicles are serviced. Flow is restored. The system absorbs damage and continues. Researchers studying traffic safety often emphasize that crashes are predictable outcomes of design choices, not random events, because factors like road layout, lane widths, intersections, and built environment features are statistically linked to crash frequency and severity. Yet public language frequently frames them as accidents, isolated, unfortunate, unavoidable. Residue complicates that narrative. It shows what does not fully disappear, what must be cleaned, remembered, or quietly absorbed. The system moves forward, but traces remain.